Live right here on this Thursday morning on the early line on SportsGrid. It is the daily basis with our guy, Craig Mish, MLB insider here on the SportsGrid network, of course, the host of Newswire starting at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Craig, only a 7-game slate today in Major League Baseball, a shorter slate, but we'll preview a ton of the marquee matchups with you, so we're glad to have you here on the early line.
Yeah, afternoon baseball games, really good matchups, I think, too, especially the one we'll break down, Seattle and Minnesota, two really good pitchers there.
And the one out in Staten Island, as we shared yesterday, a.k.a. the Bronx, that's the New York Yankees taking on the Houston Astros. The Yankees, a minus 138 home money line favorite to pull off this midweek series sweep over the Stros. Of course, they swept Houston in Houston to start off this Major League Baseball season in a 4-game set. So, Craig, I want to ask you the question from this perspective. What is the bigger story in your mind? The Yankees looking to pull off the sweep and get their AL best 26th win of the year, or the Astros potentially falling to 13 games below 500 if they are not victorious tonight in the Bronx?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the Yankees have overachieved, and maybe for some that's not the case, but generally speaking, you're always going to think the Yankees are good. The odds makers are always going to make them favorites to win divisions, win pennants, and win World Series or close to it. But I don't think that is the big story here, although they've performed probably 6-7 games above where they're supposed to be right now. The story is definitely the fact that we have to wonder at this point as we're closing in on Memorial Day whether or not the Astros simply their reign is over in the American League. Now, again, it's still too early to say that because a 7-8 game winning streak puts them right back in. As I've said before, all that team needs to do is get to the postseason, and then historically they'll have Framber Valdez and Verlander, and the kid who's pitching today, Blanco's been really good too. But we're getting close to that time where you sort of have to wonder. And as we talked about previously on the show, I mean, Jose Altuve is doing his job, but there are a lot of others who are not. I mean, Abreu's in the minor leagues. My guy, Alex Bregman, he's a free agent at the end of the season. I thought he'd be an MVP candidate because that's, the kind of makeup that this guy has, A+, but it hasn't worked out for him. Pena hasn't been as good as he was a couple of years ago. And just simply put, the juice is kind of gone, it looks like, for them. I mean, is it fair to say Dusty Baker meant that much to this team? I don't know. But right now, there's no other finger to point at this point.
We see some of those odds, Craig, that pop up, including the AL pennant. They were plus 360 prices on opening day as the best team, or should I say the best odds in the American League to win the pennant. Now they're dropping down to 7-1. My thought process behind this is, what are the Astros going to do, Craig? Because it's not an organization that's probably going to panic, but when is that time where you say to yourself, like, do we make a move to shake this up, or do we just ride it out and say, these guys have done it before, eventually they're going to get it together, as opposed to making a big move?
I would say, Donnie, they'll probably ride this right to the trade deadline. That would be my guess. I don't think that they'll do anything before that, whether it's getting better or getting worse. I think a team that's in a similar spot right now is probably the Toronto Blue Jays, where they're a team that's window is sort of open right now. I think they'll wait right till the deadline to say, hey, do we go for this thing or we decide to go the other way? They have a lot of really good players on that team, too, that are underperforming. So I put those teams sort of in the same category. I do have to say, on Houston's behalf, if this is it, what an incredible run for a decade almost here of them playing outstanding baseball, getting to the ALCS, getting to the World Series. That's not to say that any team deserves a mulligan, but if there was one in baseball, I think the Houston Astros would be it if indeed their race to the postseason ends in a couple of months.
Yeah, of course, with so much notoriety, with the cheating scandal and all that happened in Houston, to still perform after that and reach 7 consecutive American League Championship Series up to this point, it is impressive baseball in H-Town. And still could get back there. Listen, very long season, still plus 148 to reach the American League playoffs. Craig, let's go around the rest of the slate on this Thursday in MLB. Some day baseball, as you mentioned, up in Minneapolis. The Twins and the Mariners, the rubber match of this 3-game set. Seattle won game 1. Minnesota responds last night in game number 2. The Twins a slight favorite with Pablo Lopez on the bump today, minus 122. Who wins this rubber match and this week's series?
Yeah, look at that total, by the way, for a day in May. I mean, you don't generally see that almost ever until the end of the season. And by the way, good pitchers today, but not household names by any means. And Gilbert and Pablo, Gilbert's been the better pitcher of the two this season for Seattle. But I do think that the Twins being at home and, having a lot of experience winning a lot of games recently, I think I would favor them ever so slightly. I see the line has ticked up a little bit from 125 to 130. Pablo's ERA this season is above 4. I would say he's probably been a little bit unlucky. Seattle does tend to strike out a lot. So I would favor Minnesota probably at home today in a close game.
Nightcap tonight's going to have those Kansas City Royals taking on the Los Angeles Angels. Waka versus Detmer is a total in this game that's listed at 8.5, but a de facto pick 'em on both sides, roughly a minus 112 price here on the Los Angeles Angels, on Kansas City as it's showing up now. Looking at this overall, Ben and I have been having a lot of fun here with Kansas City at home. Vinny P, our guy in the middle of that lineup, an RBI machine right now, but we love Vinny P up against right-handed pitchers, going up against a lefty tonight. How do you see this playing out in a very, very good Central Division? Kansas City hanging around.
Yeah, probably some runs coming in this game, I would imagine. And the Angels' bats have actually been okay. You saw them come back the other day in a game they weren't supposed to win, and they did. They're still almost, I believe, 10 or 9 games under 500, so they're not going anywhere. Kansas City's the better team, but this is not like ace versus ace by any means today on the mound with these two teams. So 8.5 is the total there. Maybe first 5 would be my over on that, because the bullpens, by the way, especially for Kansas City, has been excellent.
The Angels won 2 straight over Pittsburgh to end out that series, return back home. 9 games below 500, even Houston below them in the American League West. The Astros in that 5th and final spot. A small distinction on my end. 4th game of a midweek series between Seattle and Minnesota today. The Twins and the Mariners. Minnesota has won 2 of the first 3, looking for 3 of 4 in this series. Craig Mish, we always appreciate the time. Thank you for being here on this Thursday on the early line on SportsGrid. We'll see you on Newswire in just about 40 minutes.
All right. Thanks for having me once again. Have a great rest of the week.
Same to you. Of course, we'll continue to go around the Major League Baseball slate on this Thursday. 3 of the 7 games now in the books. 4 games to go. Donnie, right side, breaks them all down on the other side of the break here on the early line. A short 7-game slate on this Thursday around Major League Baseball. We previewed 3, 4 more to go. And speaking of 4, that's how many Chicago, the White Sox, scored yesterday in Tampa. Don't count out the Sox. 9th victory of the year. 9-28, no longer the worst record in all of the major leagues. That belongs to the Rockies, who are 8-28. Colorado and Chicago, the only 2 teams that have failed to this point to reach double-digit wins. The White Sox return home today, one of the few evening games that we have in this MLB slate. But they're an underdog against the best team in the American League Central. That's the Cleveland Guardians. Minus 158 for the Guardians on the south side of Chicago. Total at 8 now, up ever so slightly.
Hey, if we're looking at this game, too, 54 degrees at first pitch. Where is this nice spring weather we're supposed to be getting right now? At least 75 degrees. Not going to happen today. Slight wind blowing out. I should have said a 10-mile-an-hour wind blowing out, but really more towards that left foul pole than opposed to be just blowing out directly. We'll see how that plays into it tonight. Let's take a look at the pitching matchup. Ben Lively on the mound tonight for the Guardians, going up against a decent-looking lineup tonight against right-handed pitching. However, take a look at Lively's numbers. 85 batters he's faced this year. An ISO power number combined between lefties and righties, it's a 128. Weighted on base percentage, 266. So you might just want to take a leap of faith. Pham, Jimenez, Sheets, Benintendi, DeYoung, and also Corey Lee have decent numbers against righties, but I'm really not focused on this side. Let's flip it over to the other one. Eric Fetty's going to be on the mound. Not a great pitcher throughout his Major League Baseball career. He's a right-handed pitcher. Now, if you take a look at his numbers, ISO power number 188 combined between lefties and righties, because he has a much better performance rating against right-handed batters than he does lefties. So let's focus on the lefties here, Ben. 222 ISO and a 326 weighted on base percentage. So an elevated ISO power number, right around an average weighted on base percentage. There's a couple guys in this lineup that have been really good all season long for the Guardians, and good. They're both lefties here. Naylor in the 4-hole, Brennan in the 5-hole, 270 ISO, 262 ISO, back-to-back right there. There are your RBI props here. And it feels like Naylor every single game is either getting multiple RBIs or hitting a home run. Those 2 guys are my looks. Naylor and Brennan today in that game between the Guardians and the White Sox.
The final game yesterday between the Cardinals and the Mets was rained out, so St. Louis now on the road today in Milwaukee to take on the Brew Crew. Sonny Gray did not start yesterday, slated to start today for St. Louis, and the Cardinals need it. They have lost 4 straight games. They're in the cellar of the 5 teams in the National League Central in this divisional duel. Can they start to make up some ground? Minus 134 on the money line in favor of the Redbirds with Sonny Gray getting the start. Are good things headed to St. Louis today in Milwaukee?
Probably an under. You take a look at that 8. That's probably the way I would play it here. Take a look at Tobias Myers on the mound, the young right-handed pitcher for the Brewers. Only 56 batters he's faced this year. Filthy against left-handed batters, which you're going to see a lot of in that lineup today for St. Louis. But he has struggled mightily here, Ben, with right-handed batters. How about this number? ISO power number 536. Weighted on base percentage 463. So immediately you'd go to and say, who are those right-handed bats in the lineup for the Cardinals that I can trust? Maybe the best was Contreras, who, again, is going to be out a minimum of 6 weeks with that broken arm behind the plate here. Was DHing quite nicely when he was getting some of those chances. But looking at these right-handed batters, Goldschmidt, bad. Arenado, bad. You take a look at Mason Wynn, bad. I mean, there's not a lot to love. So if we flip it over to the other side, good luck on this one. Sonny Gray has been damn near untouchable this season with an 0.56 ISO power number combined between lefty and righty batters through 114 batters. The lineup does look good here for the Brewers, but typically, Ben, as we know, great pitching is usually going to beat good bats here. So let's go under the total in this game.
When you look at the Giants, they were swept this weekend in Philadelphia in a 4-game series. They go to Colorado, and they have started to right the ship. 2 straight wins over the Rocks, looking for the 3-game series sweep today at Coors Field. Total only 9.5, but the Giants are favored at a minus 162 number now live on the FanDuel Sportsbook to win all 3 games in Mile High.
How about this? Mile high cold weather here, 50 degrees at a first pitch and a 5-mile-an-hour wind blowing in. You take a look at Keaton Wynn, who's been really good this season, bet at 139. How many batters he's faced this year? 116 ISO, 292 weighted on base percentage. Quickly flip it over to the other side. Cal Quantrill, not a great pitcher last year, but a decent pitcher this year with a 147 ISO and a 314 weighted on base percentage. If you look at that Giants lineup, nobody is really scary in this outside of Terrio Estrada's having a decent season and Mike Yastrzemski. In this game, pretty much a pass for me here, Ben.
When you look also at the longest losing skid in Major League Baseball at this active moment, that's the Cincinnati Reds. 7 straight losses for Cincy. They are home today in the Great American Ballpark against the Diamondbacks. Minus 134 for the Reds, total at 8.5. At least Cincy is favored to snap the 7-game skid.